I'm Brett, and welcome once again to the Brett Chats Sport or BCS Podcast. My guest this week is Alex Hoad. He's a freelance journalist, and it was fantastic to chat with him earlier and get an insight into how a journalist's mind works, and in particular, I would strongly encourage anyone who is thinking of becoming a journalist to look at this chat that I'd like to say as well. So wonderful advice towards any aspiring journalists out there. And so, without further ado, I give you Alex Hoad. Hey Alex, and welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I'll let you introduce yourself. Like, who are you and what do you do?
My name's Alex Hoad. I'm a sports journalist and an avid sports fan as well, I would say. Particularly, I'm a bit of a Yankophile. I like my American sports, and I spend a lot of hours of the day and night indulging my passion for those two.
Yes, very much the same here as well. And who do you work for? I know that you're a freelance journalist, so who does that mean you work for then?
Jack of all trades, master of none, some would say. I work for BBC Sport Online, and I've spent the last 10, 15 years as a digital sports journalist. I work for the BBC Sport website. I do a bit of radio as well. During the cricket season in particular, I commentate for BBC Radio Kent. I also get to do bits of football punditry and reporting work as well. Some of my work during the summer is also I do the public address, so like the tannoy announcing at Kent Cricket Club at Canterbury from time to time. I work for UEFA as well. I almost forgot them. I do live text coverage of Champions League, Europa League, Europa Conference League, Nations League, FIFA World Cup qualifiers, bits and bobs as well. But live text is kind of my baby. It's what I always wanted to do. It's the most fun part of any day, I think. So it's important that I do not forget the good people at UEFA.
Okay, so I think it would be fair to say then that to many people who are watching or listening to this, then you are very much the Ron Burgundy of sports journalism, and that you are kind of a big deal if you're working for the BBC and UEFA.
It might seem like that. It's I guess the swan on top of the surface looking graceful and look at their great life. It takes a long time to get to places where you want to go, and the last 2-3 years have been pretty kind, and I've enjoyed it a lot. And trust me, every single day I feel pretty lucky to get to do what I do. That I always said, if you love what you do, then you'll never work a day in your life. And it doesn't really feel like work. I've got a rugby league game to cover this evening. I've got a football game tomorrow lunchtime, rugby union tomorrow afternoon, and then the cricket season around the corner as well. It's quite a nice way to earn a living, I have to say.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good segue for us to talk about your sporting allegiances then. Like, you've mentioned a few sports there: football, rugby league, rugby union, cricket. Are you a fan of all of those? And do you have teams that you follow in all of those, as well as the American sports that you follow?
Well, this is it. So in order to live my life, I have to know a bit about everything. Basically, one of these people that can. Well, rugby league is something I'd never really covered. I come from the southeast of England. It's not a massive hotbed of rugby league. That tends to be the north of England. And while I've kind of followed it, yes. And if there's nothing else on, I'm happy to watch it. I always get involved in grand finals and things like that. Big sporting occasions I've indulged, certainly. And it's something that I kind of great to love. Anything competitive, to be honest. When I was a kid, used to wake up in the morning, watch Transworld Sport at 7:00 on Channel 4 on a weekend morning, and just anything from around the world. If there's some kind of sporting competitive element to it, I'm on board, absolutely. And it's partly from that and those kind of random early mornings and late evenings that I got to pick up some of the sports I really like as well. The NFL, big NFL guy. Major League Baseball is perhaps one of my biggest passions of all. It goes kind of hand in hand with cricket. There aren't many people that are kind of big cricket fans that don't also kind of have an affinity for baseball and vice versa as well. There's a big crossover there. Football, it's one of those things. I'm an English guy. I grew up playing football, had to play football, and that's a big passion of mine. Had a season ticket at a club who I'm not sure I should name at the moment for quite a long time, and I don't get to go as much as I used to. But whenever I get the opportunity, it's like how I relax as well. My work life is to watch sport, tell people what's going on in sport, and when I get the opportunity to get time to myself and to actually relax, then I'll generally go and watch a bit of sport and just quite enjoy not having to talk about it. I can sit in silence rather than having to commentate. I don't have to type anything out as it's happening. I can actually just enjoy it and maybe have a drink or two as well. It's generally a nice way of relaxing.
So you mentioned that you, like me, a bit of a Yankophile when it comes to American sports. How did you get into American sports, and what teams do you support?
So for me, the first American sport that I really got into was actually the NFL. So I was kind of a misty-eyed kid in the 90s. We had kind of bits and bobs. It was a coverage again. It was kind of like Channel 4 early in the morning. Before the kind of the parents are up, they kind of kick the kids downstairs and say, just go and amuse yourselves for 2 hours before they wanted to crawl out of bed. And it often might be highlights of the previous weekend's NFL games. And I didn't really have a team or an affinity, but I like the pageantry of it all. I like it's kind of big and bold and brash and colourful, and the kind of the collisions of it all. It was exciting to me. It was a time when it seemed to be the Bills and the Cowboys every single year, and I was always going for the underdog. Never quite worked out that way. I didn't have a team as such. I just kind of enjoyed the whole spectacle of things. It wasn't until I was a bit older. I stuck to my English sports pretty much throughout kind of school time. You have to play football, had to play cricket, had to play rugby because I was an English schoolboy. When I got to university, that kind of opened up a bit of a world for me because there were people from different places that I'd not come into contact before. The first week of university, I met a guy who was friends from home with someone that was in my halls of residence. And this guy and I, sometimes, in life, you just kind of click with someone. You meet someone and you're like, this person is kind of like another piece of me that we've kind of been brought together by circumstance. And this guy, really similar. Our interests were similar. The one difference we had was he was a big baseball guy because his dad was American. He'd spent a lot of time growing up in the States as well and traveled around a bit. And he was planning on staying up, I remember, on a Tuesday night. The first was just the week after Freshers Week to watch a baseball game. It was kind of back end of the season, late September time. And his team were playing. Cincinnati Reds were his team, still are. And basically, what else do you do at 2:00 on a Tuesday night when you're at university? You've been there for 2 weeks. I'm not going to go to bed, am I? So I said, I'll stay up and watch it with you. A little bit of sport. At the time, I was kind of thinking, I like cricket. It's just going to be a slightly worse version of cricket, isn't it? It's going to have been kind of spoiled. And what I decided to do, we got a few snacks in, got a few drinks in, and I said I was going to root for the other team against his Cincinnati Reds. And that team was the San Diego Padres. And this is 24 seasons ago now. I didn't know any better. I didn't know where San Diego was. It sounded vaguely like a long way away. I figured it was like, I don't know, it's kind of Mexican team of some kind, and what they were quite doing playing against the team from Cincinnati, I wasn't sure. But watched the game with him. Cincinnati were leading, and then the Padres came back and were leading, and then the Reds came back, and I was really getting into this. The little nuances of it, I was enjoying, and the to and fro of it. Padres came back and won an absolute thriller, and I was hooked, really. Just kind of fell in love in the way that you can't really control it. I didn't go into expecting. I didn't have a lot of room in my heart or my life for another sporting passion, but it kind of managed to force its way in there. And a love affair was born, really. From that day onwards, the internet was kind of a new thing back in those days, but I did my best to kind of learn what I could. His uncle very kindly kind of got magazines sent over from the States for us, so we were reading sporting news and Sports Illustrated and things like that. It was often delayed because of the posts coming over from the west coast of the USA, but grew into a real passion of mine. And then when I was old enough and had a bit of disposable income, I decided I was going to go to San Diego. This was 2008. The Padres weren't great. We'd had some good years. We weren't great in 2008, but I'd kind of saved up, planned it, asked all my friends, does anyone want to come and watch some baseball for the weekend? And no, they did not. So I went on my own for a 4-day trip to San Diego, watched us get swept by the Mariners on our way to a 99-loss season, which was awful. But I did get to see Trevor Hoffman, who's one of my favourite players back then, one of the all-time great closers. I saw him in a save opportunity. Unfortunately, he blew the save, but I was there to see him pitch, and he came out to Hell's Bells, and it was a really, it was a great moment for me to be there at Petco. And a place that I'd seen so many times and commentaries I'd listened to in the dead of night. West Coast teams, as you know, are quite hard to follow. The 3:05 a.m. start times, it takes some doing. You can do it when you're young. The older you get, the harder it gets. And you really need to kind of write off a couple of days either side of it to get yourself prepped up for a big 3 a.m. start. But yes, the love affair was born, and I've been back, goodness me, 5-6 times since then for different spells. And I managed to get over for the biggest of them all when the Padres played the Dodgers 2022 in the NLDS. I managed to get there for the last couple of games of those and enjoy a historic turn of events as they finally slayed the Dodgers, who won 111 games and were very good. So it's been a big part of my life. I drink my coffee for the most part out of a Padres mug, and it's the first thing I tend to do in the morning between April and October is catch up on a condensed game or plan some far-flung trip, hoping maybe there might be a chance to go out this summer to go and watch them. I'd like to see, there's a series in Boston against the Red Sox in June. That's kind of on my list, and I will see if there's a possibility that I might be able to make it work this year, because it's been too long. I didn't go at all last year.
Having been to both San Diego and Boston, I can say with confidence that even if your team is losing, you're going to have a good time, because Petco Park is a wonderful ballpark in a lovely city, and Fenway Park is one of the best and most storied ballparks in all the country, isn't it? And again, it's in a wonderful city.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I've never been to Boston. I've been to Wrigley as well, which was another one that I wanted to go to. And so I've repped the Padres in a few places across the country now, and generally they don't tend to like Padres fans turning up in the Padres lid and rooting against the home team. But no, I'll give it a go again in Boston if I get an opportunity. But I love the sport, and I love the history of it, the pageantry of it. It's wonderful. It's like cricket. I love my cricket as well. It's a big part of my life. I work in it. I enjoy watching it as well to relax. But they're very different. But they're from the same family, but I guess they're kind of distant cousins. One slightly more exotic and exciting, and the other one more sedate.
I think the question that I have to ask is, if you were watching baseball at university in the early 2000s, how were you doing that? Was that on Sky Sports or
no? This was good old Channel 5 in the dead of night.
Yes,
so Channel 5
I forgot.
was a kind of a new thing right at the end of the noughties and at the end of the 90s, start of the noughties. So I think they had Tuesday night, and they maybe had a weekend game as well. So it was tough to do. Then you'd have a random ice hockey game on the next night, and then it would be something like their own version of Robot Wars the next night. And there was no kind of pattern or anything to it. There was motorsport. It was a real niche time to try and indulge it. Highlights weren't great either. The internet was pretty lacking, and baseball internet in particular took a while to get going. And then you find ways of joining communities. So the Batflips and Nerds guys and social media, that didn't happen until much, much later. So there was a Padres group called Gaslamp Ball, which was a way that I kept in touch with people over there. They found there was a lot of novelty in me, in particular, in those early days in the noughties, when they couldn't believe that people sort of 5,000 miles away had any interest in their local team and their home team. But then Europads started popping up from everywhere. There were guys in Belgium and Scotland. Nowadays we've got a great Padres UK following as well, a little group of hardcore. Most of us, well, between us, we tend to get someone out there at least once a year anyway to try and we can all live vicariously through them on their trip.
Yeah, I mean, I had genuinely forgotten about the fact that Channel 5 used to do that. Like, I'm old enough to remember the Channel 5 having the NBA and having MLB and having NHL, and it was even when I was at university they were still doing that, and that was certainly a part of my time at university was when I could get reception for Channel 5. Where I was at university, I would stay up and watch those games if I didn't have a 9 a.m. lecture. But yeah,
I did it even if I had a 9 a.m. lecture, to be honest. I think probably I'd have done a lot better had it not been for American sport. I'd have come out with a first, definitely. But there we go. That's no bitterness. It's a life experience, and I feel richer because of it.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with you. It's something that I certainly remember from my time at university was finding ways to continue my love of American sports and still be able to watch it, despite the fact that I didn't have my parents' Sky Sports package anymore to be able to fall back on. But yeah, one of the things that I can ask you then, as someone who works for the BBC, how do you feel about the fact that the BBC is now showing NBA games, is showing MLB games, used to have the NFL as well? Like that must be I don't know, something that you're very glad about. Certainly for me, it eases the access to those sports, and certainly makes it easier for me to watch them. And you would hope it makes it easier for a bigger audience in this country to be able to access those sports now as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm first and foremost, I pay my license fee as well. I want to get the best out of it. I'm a dream BBC user, really, in terms of the amount of content I consume every week and different platforms as well, iPlayer, and as well as the website and TV, of course, as well. I think it's fantastic. I've done everything I can, trust me, to try and push the agenda of certain sports since I've been in the door the last few years. It isn't easy to do. It's something that a lot of it is about opportunity, and so much of it is data driven as well. In terms of in England, or sorry, in Britain, the lovers of the American sports are a hardcore, very vocal minority, and we need to kind of sometimes remember that it is a minority, and to a lot of us, it's such a big part of our life. But to a lot of people, things have improved, but it's still a real niche interest, and so the BBC have a tough act to balance the interests of everybody, and I can assure you they do their best. It doesn't keep everyone happy all the time, and that is the ultimate challenge, and I'm not sure one that will ever probably be met. To keep everyone happy all of the time is hard to do, but things are going in the right direction. I've got 2 little kids, and to have the NBA popping up now, to be able to watch the games back on iPlayer at times that suit you, and you get highlights and things on the BBC website too. It is definitely a step in the right direction. Having that access, it's a public service broadcaster. That's part of the reason I wanted to get into the BBC from when I was at university, to be honest. That was kind of the goal for everybody, to get in there to educate, inform and entertain is what the buzzwords of the BBC always used to be. And hopefully, well, if I get my way, they still are. That's what I try and do on my live texting. But yeah, the bigger the audience is and the more people that you can bring into it. The London games for MLB have been great. It's been an opportunity, a kind of a hook to really hang it on to improve the content. And of course, we'll have the same every year. All the hardcore fans that already know and love the sport will have a little moan because the coverage isn't quite the way that they would like it to be. But they have to tailor it to new audiences and try and get those people to come back year after year. Because the more the demand is there, I can assure you, the audience kind of guides what the BBC do. So if there are a lot of people yearning for it, it will eventually come that there are more and more opportunities. We're seeing it already this year. The Ohtani factor, such a big iconic global name, has already started to lead to more stories on the website as well. And it might not necessarily all be the box scores and the day-to-day game reports that we'd like to see, but it's a step in the right direction, hopefully. And it's a process. It's definitely not an overnight thing. Hopefully 2024 will be a good year, and having another London series, a great matchup, the Mets and the Phillies in London this summer, hopefully that will help on the journey too.
Yeah, and what I would say is, someone who isn't affiliated with the BBC in this conversation, is I was thoroughly impressed with the BBC's coverage of the London series last year. I loved every second of it. I thought it met those 3 criteria of informing, educating, and certainly entertaining. It was funny. I think Felix White did a wonderful job of being the beginner's guide into the sport. He clearly knows baseball, but he acted like he was a novice and was asking his 2 fellow co-commentators to explain the rules, explain what everything meant in that box score in the top left-hand corner of people's screens. I thought for an initial go at presenting MLB to this wide, varied BBC audience. I thought it was absolutely exceptional, and if I don't get the chance to go to the London games this year, I certainly look forward to seeing, hopefully, Felix, Melanie Newman and Xavier Shrugs on commentary again this year, because I could not say enough good things about how good they were last year, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, that's good, and that's what the BBC like to hear. It's a learning thing every single time. They're trying to learn from the NFL. Did it early, 2007. It was a very different experience going to the NFL London games in 2007 than it is going to the NFL London games in 2023.
Indeed.
The amount they've come on, the coverage of them, but the overall events, that they've been polished so well that it's pretty seamless now in terms of going to wherever you go to a game. It's not a million miles away from going to an authentic NFL experience. In some ways, it's probably actually more fun going to an NFL London game at the Tottenham Stadium with 60,000 raucous people. The Bills game last year was nuts. Compared to going to some of the soulless, kind of half-empty stadiums where the home crowd have kind of given up because it's a down year. I recommend it to everybody. And the MLB are a long way behind. The NBA came earlier than the MLB, and they kind of gave it a go in London, and it hasn't really taken off. It's been kind of a more of a tourist trap, a very expensive experience to go to the O2 and watch the NBA games. The MLB are mid-season games. Everyone's in mid-season form. The product is there. You need the weather there. You need a bit of continuity as well. Obviously, COVID was devastating for sport in plenty of different ways. It has not helped in terms of the London games at all, unfortunately. So we're kind of starting again, and quite what happens in 2025, no one is entirely sure quite what's going to happen and where it's going to be. But hopefully, from my point of view, as a Southeast England-based baseball enthusiast, then I very much like to think that there's another opportunity to try and continue the positive momentum from 2024 and the Mets and the Phillies into 2025, and who knows who potentially might be able to get tempted to come to London.
I think this is one of those areas where we may have to disagree, Alex, because I'm very firm in my belief that if you only have American sports fixtures in London, you are, how do I put this? I certainly feel slightly alienated from as someone who's from Greater Manchester, because I think there is an entire country outside of London and the home counties, but we are expected to come down to London, and all the cost that involves, rather than the sport coming to us. So it's in that sense, it's a little bit of a bugbear for me. But I do, on the other hand, understand why they would go to London, because London is supposedly the place to be in this country.
I think there's probably a lot of factors that go into it, and I completely do understand the travel. It's the same with the England football team. It was a lot more fun for me when the games were going all around the country, and you have random games at St Mary's Stadium in Southampton, and then they got to Newcastle and then Old Trafford, and some of the greatest moments, the David Beckham free kick at Old Trafford. It was fun when it was a roadshow rather than having to do everything at Wembley just to pay it off. I completely understand that. And for me, the experience at Wembley for an NFL game is not the same. And also at Twickenham, to be honest, the Tottenham Stadium is a good fit for the NFL. It's almost like an NFL stadium in the way it's done anyway. It's so modern. Wembley already feels not that modern. And so it's a different experience when you go to a game there as opposed to not. I figure a lot of it is the international fans, the transport links to London, I guess, as well. I'm all for it. Let's have more. Let's have more sport in the UK. I do think the Germany's fantastic. For every year, you see a lot of Germans that travel over to London to watch the NFL games. They're getting their own taste of the action now, and they're a very special atmosphere there as well. Scandinavia, they absolutely deserve it. They are massive fans, and they travel in their numbers every year. At some point, they need to go. Listen, the way that it's been done, the NFL are leading the way in terms of bringing the game around the world. We saw the MLB in Seoul this week, the Padres and the Dodgers, which is a fun series to watch at 10 a.m. UK time. A godsend for those of us that, for once, it's the San Diego lot that have to wake up at 3 a.m. to watch a game. It's wonderful, delicious irony, and we've enjoyed it very much. We're in the early days. It was so
kind of Yamamoto to give you all those runs in the first inning as well, wasn't it?
It was quite unexpected. I've got to be honest. It was very generous. We needed a good start after the way that the first game ended. It's slightly unfortunate, calamitous end with the ball going through the webbing of Jake Cronenworth's glove. So yes, we needed a bit of a running start, and we got it, and to eventually come out on top 15-11. And yes, a pretty historic one. The happy flight back to San Diego for one team, and a less happy flight, I guess, back to LAX for the other team. But we're seeing sport all around the world now. Brazil's got it coming. Spain, it's one of those things. These are global brands. They're only going to grow and grow. So hopefully, you never know, you might get yourself a little a sporting event at Old Trafford or Salford City, wherever you like it to be. I don't mind at some point in the future, and we'll have to come up and head to Houston and get up the country to come and watch it up there.
Given you, I'm guessing that you are quite unique among BBC journalists in that you have this history of loving the American sports, and you have you're clearly very knowledgeable about those sports. Like, do you see yourself getting opportunities to report on those for the BBC, or maybe even for other broadcasters as a freelancer, given your knowledge and your expertise of those sports?
It's an interesting one. So this is all anecdotal because I can't in any way speak for the BBC or any of my colleagues. But nowadays, in my current work environment, I'm surprised by how many people have teams in other sports as well. Before, it was always, if you went into a new work environment, it was always, who do you support? And it's football. Who's your football team is generally what people mean. But now whenever there's a kind of a weekend comes around, people are talking about NFL. Everyone seems to have an NFL team, and baseball is definitely more on the niche side. There aren't many people, but the people that do, if you say you have a team, they tend to be good fans. They know what's going on. They'll know who they played last night and who they're playing tonight, and what the state of play is, and where we are in the state of the season. And that's definitely something that when I was growing up, that wasn't the case at all. No one really had NFL teams. You never saw any NFL gear, and if you ever saw anything, it was going to be a Yankees hat, maybe a Boston B. But if you'd ask them what the teams were, they just said, "I just like the hat." It was always the way. I just like the hat. It's a fashion statement as much as anything. And the same with like the Raiders, the silver and black Raiders gear. I think that was more of a cultural appropriation rather than I've got an undying love for the Raiders, the Oakland Raiders, the LA Raiders, wherever they might be, Vegas Raiders now. So we've seen that bridge into when you see gear now. I love going to the I'll say it again, the London game, and trying to pick off all the different teams from the different sports, and we had a lot of fun at the Olympic Stadium last year as well, trying to pick out see if you can find a cap or a shirt or a jersey from every single different team, and it's wonderful to see. The MLB UK community is fantastic. It's something that goes from strength to strength every year, and I kind of wish it was, if it had been there when I was growing up, it would have been a real help, because in those early years it was kind of hard. Felt like a lone leaf on the wind, just kind of blowing around, no one really to talk to, and if you ever did try and strike up a conversation, it often didn't work because there wasn't that kind of opportunity for people to follow along. And the internet's obviously made it a 1,000 times easier, and the communication, social media is taken on to the next level. So goodness knows in 5 years' time what we'll be doing. We'll all be able to have holographic meetups and sit in a stadium in the metaverse somewhere and actually watch along with fake beer, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe the argument for why I need to come to the London series this year, is for no other reason to make sure that there's some Oakland A's representation at the stadium while there still can be Oakland A's
you'd be
representation.
Surprised, honestly, Brett. There was more than I expected last year. I'm a big fan as well. It's a good colourway, so and you get the gold and green out. It's good, and they stand out as well, so they're easy to spot. But yeah, the more the merrier, and yeah, definitely fly the flag all the while you can.
Yeah, I think this maybe leads on to moving back to your career in journalism. You mentioned at the start, who you work for, and and then we've segued into your sporting allegiances. How did you come to become a journalist? Was this something that you wanted to do from being a child, or was it something that just developed as you entered adulthood? What was your pathway into journalism?
So it's kind of a dull answer, because yes, essentially when I was at primary school, my head teacher, who I admired very much, went to a really small village primary school, and I used to be able to write. It was that simple, and he said, "Oh, you should be a journalist." And I was like, "Okay." And that was the plan, really. It was that simple. Someone that you look up to, the year 6 teacher, as he was at that time, just said, "This is what you should do," and it's kind of that's the plan. There are not many things that I'm that good at in life. Being enthusiastic about sport is definitely one of them, and hopefully writing is another one. Trying to keep people informed and ideally entertained as well. I went the long way around. I went into news journalism, which is something which most people have to do. It's quite tricky to just jump straight into sport. It's easier now than it used to be, actually, because there are a lot of apprenticeships and there are degrees in sports journalism, which they just weren't when I did it. Now a lot of it's now you can go to broadcasting journalism, social media. There's a lot of different ways in now. Then it was basically get yourself into a local newspaper, and that's what I did. Did a journalism degree, traineeship at a local newspaper doing news. When you're in a newspaper environment, you can kind of shuffle over and talk to the sports desk, let them know that you enjoy sport, that you kind of have shared interests, offer to do stuff if they ever need you to do anything. You'll always be around and you'd be keen to help, and that's how it happened for me, and I did. Went to a couple of games, took some photographs. It's not something I particularly ever. I was always more about the words than photography, but whatever you can do to get experience, you can never have too much experience, and when you're trying to build a career. And so went to pre-season friendly football games. I covered periods when the sports staff were on holiday. Did whatever I could do, and I was fairly good at news as well. It was my day job, my bread and butter. I got picked up from my local paper. Went off and worked for the Nationals for a couple of years for doing some agency work. So I got hired out to different newspapers basically every day or for a month at a time here and there to do special projects. Again, all focused on news, but it wasn't what I was interested in. As I said at the start, my happy place, my relaxing time has always been a sport. And if there was ever a way to try and bring it all together, it was something that I was kind of keen to do. It's a bit like, I guess, football management or coaching in any sport, elite sport really. There's a lot of pressure when you're doing news journalism for national newspapers and latterly websites as well. And you don't tend to spend, the ones that can hack it for a long period of time are the ones that go a very long way. And I did 2.5, 3 years, I think, and it kind of, you get to a point where it's starting to burn you out a little bit, and you kind of think, what do I really want to be doing here? And so I kind of took a fairly hefty sideways step to go and do sport on a local level back at kind of like regional journalism. And it was more kind of focused on the internet then than newspapers, because newspapers, unfortunately, are less popular, less profitable than they used to be, and the world is changing. So yes, went back to go and do regional journalism, and that's how I kind of got into. I covered Kent cricket for 7 or 8 seasons. Did football, golf. You need to be a jack of all trades, and there's no real specialisms, or it's quite rare to be able to do a specialism. I did the Olympics, which I was very fortunate. There were only 10 regional journalists that got press passes for London 2012, and I was very fortunate to be able to get to do that. Go along to every day, cover it for not only for my own newspaper group, but across the region as well, and made the most of that opportunity every day, Super Saturdays. And that was where kind of the live text was really starting to kick in, social media and kind of the live text for me. That was the most fun part of it, bringing people into the stadium and explaining what was going on. And the stuff that they can see on TV is great, but it's all the other stuff that they can't see that's behind the cameras, that's in the bowl of the stadium. And so that's why it's extra special for me. That was the best month of my professional life, still by some distance, covering a home Olympics as a kind of a youngish sports journalist was incredible. And so when I go back to the London games at the same stadium, and you kind of look at the roof and you look at the sky, and you kind of allow yourself to drift off and think, oh, that's where Mo Farah was, and that's Jess Ennis over there, and yes, that was Greg Rutherford's long jump pit, and it's now a bullpen, and it's a pretty special opportunity. But I went from there, and 2020 was a very, very weird year. A lot of stuff happened in 2020.
You don't say.
Yes, quite. At the time, what I'll say is that at the time it kind of feels like the world gets kind of shaken up so much. I wasn't entirely sure what was going to happen. I didn't think necessarily when I was covering sport and all the sport was being called off. I was kind of thinking, I'm not sure where we go from here. Is this going to be a month thing, or is this going to be a 5-year thing? And where do I go from here? And I found myself without a job, and I just decided to do what I really wanted to do. So I basically started trying to get back in, and I wanted to try and get in the BBC. I wanted to try and get into some doing some radio, which I'd enjoyed doing just before the start of lockdown. I did a co-coms on a football game in March 2020, and I was just getting into it, getting really excited. Then, right, season's off. Sorry, maybe see you again. So yeah, Radio Kent were very, very good with me. Managed to get, when sport came back, managed to get in, doing some commentaries through Radio Kent. Threw up an opportunity or two to apply for work at the BBC website, which I eventually got into as well. UEFA were very good in 2020. It was kind of a real reset, and it could have gone one way or the other. But what I did was I ended up basically saying yes to everything. My kids have a favourite film, which is called Yes Day. It's one of these Netflix productions, basically where the parents have to spend the whole day saying yes to everything, because parents nag and they say, no, you can't do that. No, you'll hurt yourself. No, you'll fall over. No, it's a waste of money. No. So I made a deal with my kids to say yes to everything that would help potentially. And so it kind of worked out pretty well for me in that first year or two, and it got me to a few good places professionally. And so I kind of kept going, really. So I've done talks at schools and podcasts, and I've spoken to university students, trying to help them out with questionnaires, and people wanting to get into cricket journalism. Basically, anything positive that I can try and do and say yes. It's not all about kind of getting rich. It's about trying to do the right thing, make people hopefully see that you are willing to try hard to work, do the right thing. If you can help out people, that's great. And it's got me here. So now I do 4 jobs at the moment that I really enjoy. And it's busy and it pays pretty much all my bills, and I get to indulge my passion at work and also when I'm not at work too, and sometimes both, which is when the dream really does come true.
Indeed. And I think what I would ask then is, you've answered this partially already, but what would your headline advice be to anyone who is an aspiring journalist, for anyone who's thinking of maybe pursuing journalism? What do they need to know?
The sad answer to that is sometimes it's people. You might need to know people. It will definitely help to know. The more people you know, the easier it will be. The question then becomes, how do you get to know people? Unfortunately, it's not a great answer, because it's going to end up being essentially volunteering for stuff. There are always, depending on which niche you want to get into, if you want to get into football, for example, there are a lot of teams. The Premier League is not the be all and end all. There are a lot of teams. There are 92 teams in the Football League, and there are a lot more than 92 below it as well. And so find a team that's local to you. If you want to find out how the kind of the game works, how media works. If you want to write match reports, you want to get into doing commentary, go and find a local team, whatever it might be, National North and National South. Below that, it doesn't really matter. Find a team that's local to you. Just contact them and say, I'm keen to get into journalism. I want some experience. I'm happy to work for nothing, which is the most important thing when you are very starting out. You can't start going around saying, right, I'll do this for £25 an hour. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. You need to have a bit of a portfolio, a show reel, something to show that you are keen. And the more that you do while you can, this is generally for young people wanting to get into it. If you were living at home, make the absolute most of that. the more you can do and the keener you can show that you are, the people will sit up and take notice. They'll think they've done all this themselves. They've spent a whole season going to watch Skelmersdale or whoever it might be. And they must really want to get into it. And there are people that you will find when you go out to games, when you write to newspapers or websites, ask for work experience, you won't get yeses from all of them. You might not even get replies from all of them, but keep trying to get in. And the more opportunities you get, take them. And it kind of spirals. It's having that. The thing that separates people generally is the amount that they want to do it and don't take no for an answer. So don't just let that email get ignored. You follow it up at least once. Don't go crazy. Don't stalk people. But just keep going. Try and get as much experience as you can. It won't make you rich. Certainly not at the start. Maybe not ever. But as I'll go back to it, if you enjoy it, then you'll feel very rich. There are a lot of people that I know that go to bed at night dreading what they have to do the next day, and they don't want to go into work, or they can't wait for the weekend. And I've got to say, that's not my life. I've worked a lot of weekends in the last 10-15 years, and I don't think I've dreaded very many of them. And I've got a rugby league game in a few hours tonight. I've got football tomorrow, rugby union tomorrow. I've got UEFA coming back in another 10 days. It's stuff to look forward to, and that's only by doing kind of the dirty work quietly and asking for help and asking for opportunities. And that's kind of how it's opened up for me. And hopefully a few other people will come along. And if they do and they overtake me, please remember me if I'm ever applying to you for shifts.
What's your view of doing a journalism degree? Is that a good route to take, or is it better to do another type of undergraduate degree and then take the NTCJ course to become a journalist? What's your view on that?
Now, there's no right or wrong answer. There is only my own experience, and I don't think it is as necessary as it seems, and it's certainly not as necessary as it used to be. When I left school and went to university, I had no choice. It was just, you had to do it. It would have been very strange to have not gone to university. Or it was certainly made to feel that way by the teachers and the parents. And I 90+% of people that were in my year that left school went to university, and it felt like that's how it had to be. Now, I don't think that's necessarily true. As you mentioned, the NCTJ courses they're often, you can get apprenticeships or traineeships, which are not going to make you rich, but they'll get you on the ladder. You get your foot in the door at a company, and you get your training paid for while you're there. And it's kind of like you're learning on the job and also getting the qualification at the same time. And so after 2 years, you're probably qualified, and you're going to be competing with people that have just come out of university for opportunities, and you've already got a couple of years in the newsroom plus the qualification, and they've probably got a lot of student loan debt and not a lot of real world experience, if we're completely honest, unless they are a very switched on person that's trying their very best to get all that experience while they get doing their degree at the same time, which is hard to do because a lot of people have to work. So yes, it's a tricky one. I'm not going to push anyone. Everyone has to make their own decisions and for their own reasons. If I were to do it again, I would be looking at opportunities like that. So apprenticeships, traineeships for people that are interested in getting into the industry. It doesn't have to start at that kind of school leaving age. That's the thing. You can start on school newspapers. You can start volunteering and taking photographs or videos or interviewing players or doing social media stuff. You can do that when you're 15, 16, 17. There's no rules against that. Get in touch with people, show that you're keen, and then you've already got something to show to people when you're applying to whatever it might be, the Times, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, traineeship schemes, the Sky Sports, the BBC do it as well. Absolutely, head to the BBC. We've got a lot of opportunities for people that want to get in at the bottom, at the entry level stuff. There are always opportunities. It's a lot easier now than it was 15, 20 years ago as well. So that's what I would do if I was doing it all over again. I wouldn't necessarily. I actually went back and did a second non-journalism degree as a grown-up in sports science, because it's something that I'm interested in, and I thought it might kind of add some knowledge, another string to my bow as well, in terms of professionally and also kind of outside of that as well. I've got kids that I'm trying to raise, and you can't know too much about yourself and how you work and and how to kind of manage everything as well. I got more out of the sports science degree by some distance than I did out of the journalism degree. And then when I worked in journalism, a lot of the stuff that I had already had in the journalism degree, I had to do anyway for work. So the shorthand, I had to do a separate shorthand exam. I had to do new law exams, and qualifications had moved on in the time since I'd done the degree. So you don't really, if you want to go to uni, that's great. You'll spend a lot of money and you'll have some amazing times, and maybe you'll meet a random American person and develop a love of baseball at 2 a.m. Who knows? I'm not going to discourage that in any way. But
sorry.
No, I was going to say you have to make the decisions for the right reason, and there may be better ways now than there were back in the day 20 years ago about how to get into journalism if that is the chosen option for you.
Okay, and I'll ask one final question on this before we wrap up. You mentioned earlier on that unfortunately a lot of journalism can be about who you know. For those people who don't know people and don't have that in, what is the best way for them to distinguish themselves so that they can get their foot in the door and pursue journalism as a career then?
Yeah, so there are ways of the best way. A lot of us will find that you get unsolicited DMs maybe on your socials from people. You might get emails sometimes. Invariably, you can tell the ones that are real and the ones that are not real pretty quickly. So I've had one in the last week or so who's from a year 10. So what's that going to be? 15, 16-year-old, something like that. Basically someone that wants to get into sports journalism. He's doing media, something to do with media. I guess GCSE, is it still called that? I think it is. At the moment, and basically wanted to do some research. So he had a questionnaire to fill in, and he wanted some help doing it. Absolutely fine. That took me 11 minutes or something, and I was happy to do that. That kind of a thing, trying to involve people like that, is a good way. Reaching out to people. A lot of people will ignore you. You might get 10% of people that actually engage and reply. If you have questions, ask questions. Some people will answer, some people won't. I try to answer because I'm on my whole say yes to everything. There'll be other people that might be too busy or just might be no people. I'm not sure. But don't be afraid to reach out. Do definitely, even if you don't know anyone, you've never met a journalist before in your life, you don't have anyone in your family, you have no names to drop, doesn't matter. Probably email the sports desk at your local newspaper, your local website, whatever it might be, and just introduce yourself. Let them know that you are there. Invariably, people will be happy to know that there are people willing to help. In this day and age, and in the local media particularly, they don't have budgets to throw around to people. They're not going to say, here's 150 quid, go and watch a match and send us a report on the whistle. That's not going to happen. But they might be saying, well, actually, here's 350 words. We've got space for 350 words on this match this weekend. If you want to go and send us a report, then great. And I can't pay you for it, but if it's good, then we might be able to give you a byline. And then all of a sudden, then that's a little something to hold on to. You've got your name on something. You can print it off and show your family. You can start your own portfolio and set yourself a website up. You can get the muckraker things are very good at kind of combining things that are with your name on it and your byline on it to kind of show people that you have an online presence. And having that online presence is huge. If you can, I'm not particularly good at this, but there's a new generation of people that are, in terms of like you're doing now, starting a podcasts, TikTok, analyzing the kind of the day-to-day sports news. Building up a following on social media is tricky to do, and that takes real work. That's something you can do every single day. You don't necessarily need to know people. You just need to have something to talk about, and you can generate your own identity. You can always create your own brand, and there's nothing stopping you. If you're 14, 15, there's nothing stopping you doing that at all. And the better you are at that, the more people will sit up and take notice. You can say, oh, me and my 9,000 followers want to go and watch a game this weekend, and I'm going to do a video diary from it, and I want to do you a match report. Is that okay? And yeah, the more of those people you can reach out to, get your name known, that's how it starts. Get a bit of momentum early. Don't expect to get rich. Do say yes. Don't be too big for your boots. You have to be humble, be grateful, say thank you for the opportunity. And the more of that you do, you'll find that the easier it probably gets.
Right, well, Alex, I would say that I'm very aware that you have got a rugby league game to get to, so I don't want to take up any more of your time, but it's been an absolute joy to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining me, and I can say with absolute confidence that when we started chatting, I did not think that we were going to be promoting a Jennifer Garner Netflix film during this chat, but it's you never know what's going to come from a chat, do you?
That's absolutely right. Yes, I'm sorry for taking up too much of your Friday afternoon as well. Apologies.
No, it's been an absolute joy to chat to you, Alex. It's anytime I get to talk to someone as interesting as you is time well spent. So once again, thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you enjoy the rugby league game this evening.
I'll do my best. Thank you, Brett. Thanks for having me.
All right. So there you had it, a fantastic chat with Alex, I felt. He had a lot to say and all of it was incredibly insightful. I honestly could have talked to him for hours, and there were so many questions I didn't ask him during that chat you just saw, but we recorded this on a Friday afternoon, and as Alex mentioned, he's got a full weekend of sporting fixtures that he's going to be reporting from, and he had to get off to get to that rugby league game he mentions. One thing that I would say is I'm no journalist, but I would certainly agree with what Alex was saying there. It's going to be costly. You might not earn money initially, but go to your local paper and offer to cover that lower league fixture if you're wanting to get into journalism. And I would also say find the thing that makes you unique. If you are someone that likes British ice hockey or speedway or any of the other niche sports that are played in this country, and you have a knowledge of that, and you can talk expertly about that and write well about that, offer to do that as well, because it will build your reputation. It will show how valuable you are and what you can offer, but other people can't, and it sets you apart while you are building that portfolio that you can then show people to hopefully get yourself paid work in the future. For now though, that's it for another episode of the BCS Podcast. I thank you for joining me again, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye bye now. The BCS Podcast is written, produced, edited and hosted by me, Brett Walker. Thank you to Music Unlimited and Pictorbay for the use of the music and sound effects. This week's guest was Alex Hoad.